the Global Shelter Cluster Coordinator on behalf of IFRC. Welcome to the webinar on the USAID BHA grant to the Global Shelter Cluster. This is the second of two webinars. We had one yesterday for other people in a different time zone. I would like to start the meeting by inviting Brett Moore, the Global Shelter Cluster Coordinator on behalf of UNHCR, to give some welcome remarks and opening remarks. Brett, please.
Thank you, Pablo. Thank you very much. And welcome to all the colleagues online, those that we know within the cluster and also newcomers as well. We're really happy to have this second session here this morning, and I just wanted to give a brief introduction to the work of the cluster, and also then between the colleagues in IFRC and UNHCR, there'll be some discussion on the elements of the grant and what the expectations are. So for those of you that are not too familiar with the work of the Global Shelter Cluster, the Global Shelter Cluster is a network of humanitarian agencies and institutions in shelter and settlement to promote good coordination and appropriate shelter and settlement responses to humanitarian crises, and helping to build coordination and response capacity. The UN, who is the donor for this grant, that is BHA, they are one of the largest donors of humanitarian shelter and settlements. They've given $2 million grant for this series of actions. The grant has actually commenced officially and will run through until September of 2022. As many of you know, that the grant refers largely to strengthening the key approaches within the Global Shelter Cluster strategy, which is coordination, advocacy, evidence-based response, and capacity. The co-leads for the Global Shelter Cluster, UNHCR and IFRC, we have specific responsibilities that we're accountable for. But for this grant, the funds will largely be passed through to partner agencies. So the partner agencies are responsible to contribute also their specific areas of interest and expertise, ensuring effective division of roles and responsibilities. The grant aims also to support initiatives owned by country, region, and partners with their processes and structures at country level. So we're really supporting a local level response and building capacity in that sense. We appreciate everybody's interest and participation. Hope you find it useful in deciding whether you want to contribute to the implementation of this grant. IFRC will be the recipient of the grant with the funds from BHA, and will be preparing agreements for the successful partners to implement the activities. The funding is limited, as we know, so there's only a selected number of initiatives that will be supported. And of course, the processes will be very fair and transparent and fully explained to you today, with an abundance of written material also for you to refer to and guide you through the application process, should you choose to apply. Now, we hope that this will lead to the further strengthening of the cluster, the effectiveness of the cluster, the field coordination activities and prioritization of works at country level. We really benefited from previous rounds of grant funding from ECHO, and we look forward to this being a similar process where it really takes the cluster from strength to strength and ultimately benefits those people that have that are victims of disaster and conflict and are displaced, and we need to support all people in these scenarios. So we hope to be able to utilize the funds for these kinds of activities. We also thank On behalf of UNHCR, I would like to thank IFRC for managing the grant on behalf of the cluster. It's not an easy job, and as many of you know, UNHCR undertook similar actions for the past 3 ECHO grants. So we know it's a lot of work. We know that IFRC will do a good job at this, and we also encourage all partners to work collaboratively in the process to the benefit of all. And we really welcome the interest and initiative of all applicants. So we thank you all for attending. I will now hand over to Pablo and Ella and Miguel to go through more of the details, and we can begin the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brett. Before we start with the content of the presentation, I would like for a couple of other individuals to introduce themselves. They are going to be key in managing the grant together with myself. So please, Miguel, if you could introduce yourself and your role.
Hi everyone, my name is Miguel Urquia. I work with UNHCR for the Global Shelter Cluster as the Deputy Global Shelter Cluster Coordinator. I'm Pablo's counterpart in UNHCR.
Thank you, Miguel. And Shirin, please, can you introduce yourself and your role?
Yes, hello everyone, my name is Shirin and I'm with IFRC as part of the support team. And this year I will be supporting the Global Shelter Cluster in managing this grant. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirin. Thank you. So without further ado, we will start introducing this grant to you and the different activities that are available for funding. There are in total 18 activities that are open for project partner proposals for this BHA grant. By the way, BHA stands for the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance of USAID. It's what OFDA is now called. OFDA has now changed name to be BHA, the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. We are going for an open selection method for all interested partners to apply. So everyone is welcome to apply to the 18 activities. For some of the activities, there are some requirements, but within those organizations or partners that meet those requirements, everyone is free to apply. The overall budget available through this grant, we have divided it in 3 chunks. As Brett mentioned in his introductory remarks, the Global Shelter Cluster co-lead agencies, UNHCR and IFRC, have specific responsibilities as co-lead agencies that they are accountable for. But obviously, this being a network of agencies and institutions that want to work together, it's important that those agencies within their interest and expertise that participate in the Global Shelter Cluster also have an opportunity to implement and advance activities of our joint strategy. So there are 3 blocks within which we have divided the funds available from this grant. It's approximately 1/3 for each of those blocks. The first 2 blocks, the funding for the partners and the funding for UNHCR, are the ones that we are opening up for project partner proposals for a total of $1,190,000. The third block for IFRC, because IFRC is the direct recipient of the grant from BHA, then IFRC will be implementing its share of the grant directly. So the total direct cost of those 3 blocks is $1.6 million, $1.650 million. That's excluding the grant management cost, which is also part of the direct cost. The grant management cost is an additional $130,000 for the 2-year period. And then there's the indirect cost. No partners could ask for administration or indirect cost in excess of 7%, but that's the remaining funding for the total budget of nearly $2 million. So, sorry, within those first 2 blocks, the partners and the UNHCR allocation of the funding, which is what we are opening up for project proposals, there are 18 activities in total. So I am going to go through these 18 activities for you to understand what is available for funding and what the requirements are. The first chunk of this funding refers to what we call search capacity for preparedness and response. Perhaps the term search capacity is a bit restrictive because these positions do not only do search, they also provide remote support and they also advance tools and guidance for the Global Shelter Cluster. But their primary role indeed, or the primary responsibility, is to be available to deploy within 72 hours of a cluster activation, or when there is an escalation in the conflict and there are additional needs or gaps in country-level shelter clusters. The primary responsibility is to provide a human resource capacity at the country level. There are a total of 6 positions available under this block of funding. In fact, it's 3 different roles, 2 positions for each of those roles. So I will describe the first role is the global focal point for housing, land and property, HLP. HLP is a key issue in every shelter and settlement response. We have had global focal points for HLP in the past, and we have realized that the demand is higher than what we can provide, we can meet, so there is an additional need for HLP capacity at the country level. When these roles are not deployed, they provide remote support, they gather lessons learned, they participate in training, develop guidance and tools, and coach all the staff at the country level in their respective areas of expertise. So for housing, land and property, we have 2 positions available and $65,000 available for each of those positions. Now the grant is until the end of September 2022. So we are estimating that by the time we finalize the process of allocating the funding, these positions could start perhaps by April if everything runs smoothly, and it would be for 18 months until the end of September 2022. So obviously $65,000 will not be enough to cover that position full-time for 18 months. It will require co-funding. We obviously prefer if the hosting agency for this position provides somebody fully dedicated to the cluster, but if not possible because funding doesn't reach, then we also accept partial dedication. This can vary from 80% to 50% minimum. I will go through the selection criteria for all of these activities later on in the presentation, and I will also explain how to apply, what documents you have to submit, etc. So we will get there. I hope this is clear. Now I would like Miguel to please explain a little bit about the 2 next roles, the Robin Cluster Coordinator and the Robin Information Management Officer. Miguel.
Yes, thank you very much, Pablo. As some of you may know, UNHCR has an agreement with the US government that the funding that UNHCR receives goes through a certain way. So UNHCR cannot receive funding from BHA. The support that UNHCR will receive from this grant will be done from funding provided to UNHCR standby partners that will second personnel to UNHCR. We have found this arrangement to be very, very useful and very productive in the past when we had the ECHO grant, and we would like to continue with that arrangement. Therefore, we are continuing here. We see search capacity, though 2 positions that we had in the past with the ECHO grant. In the past, they were done by NORCAP. And these 2 positions, or these 2 roles rather, we would like to repeat them this time with the BHA grant. Now, the first couple of activities, activities 3 and 4, are for a role called Senior Robin Cluster Coordinator. These are senior positions of cluster coordinators that will be traveling to the field to be deployed for a maximum of 6 months and for a maximum of 50% of their time, or 50% of the 18 months that we have here in the table. The role will be to set up clusters, newly activated clusters or to cover gaps in case of existing clusters. Or maybe there is a need for increased capacity or this type of search capacity. The 90,000 for each of the two roles includes the salary and perhaps some additional travel costs, although in principle we will be asking the country, the recipient country clusters to cover for the travel cost. But there could be some cases where this is not possible. The same applies for the following two activities, 5 and 6, which are two positions for roving information management officers. This role was also done in the past with the ECHO grant, and it's very similar to the role of the coordinator, but focused on delivering information management services. The same comments that I made for the coordinators apply for this one. I can answer questions later if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Then for the next set of activities, they focus around localization, capacity building, preparedness, and outreach. And we have 3 set of activities. The first one around capacity building, preparedness, and outreach. There is a lump sum amount of $40,000. This is to fund activities or initiatives that strengthen the capacity, preparedness, and outreach of country-level clusters, or regional or global, but obviously the focus is at the country level. So this could include preparedness workshops, contingency planning, support to contingency planning processes and preparedness activities, country-level trainings, any activity that advances those 3 headings of capacity building, preparedness, and outreach, also dissemination activities, etc. So there is a lump sum of 40,000, but because we would like this grant to reach as many partners as possible, we have established a cap of $10,000 per initiative. So no single proposal under Activity 7 can exceed $10,000. So if you would like to organize a preparedness workshop, let's say, the maximum amount we will fund for that preparedness workshop will be 10,000, so that we can fund at least 4 initiatives under Activity 7. The second set of activities is to support localization. This is activity number 8. There is a lump sum of 60,000, but similar to the Activity 7, we would like the funding to reach as many partners as possible. So we have established a cap of a maximum of $15,000 per initiative under this localization fund. The main purpose of this Activity 8 is to support initiatives that advance localization. So again, the definition is fairly wide because we don't want to constrain the range of activities that we can support, but obviously you have to justify and argue how what you are proposing advances localization. This could be training of local NGOs, facilitating hub coordination at the local level. It could be translation. It could include workshops as well. It could include supporting the participation of local agencies in the national level shelter cluster or national NGOs. It could cover travel and accommodation, travel costs for local organizations to cluster events. It's fairly widely defined, but obviously your proposal will have to establish how it supports localization. And the third set of activities under this block, activity number 9, is to support the development and updating of online trainings. We realize that one of the ways we can have bigger impact and bigger reach in building capacity and localization is through online trainings. So there is a lump sum of 40,000. There's no cap here in the total amount that we can provide. I mean, the cap would be 40,000, obviously, and this is to support the development or the updating of the development of new online trainings or updating of existing online trainings. It could also cover translation of existing online trainings into other languages. And this block, as I said, it's this activity. There are $40,000 available for this. The next block of activities, activities 10 to 15, are to support analysis, learning, and improvement of shelter and settlement responses. They fall under the result 2 of this BHA grant. This BHA grant has 2 results. The result 1 you can see at the top, they're highlighted in green, is improved shelter and settlements planning and implementation processes that lead to increased emergency and transitional coordination and response. And the result 2 is enhanced humanitarian shelter and settlements practice through an integrated system of analysis and learning, which informs widely shared policy and guidance. Within this second result, this set of activities focuses on analyzing, learning, and improving responses. Activities number 10 and 11 are human resource related, and I will hand over to Miguel to explain these 2 activities. Miguel?
Yes, thank you, Pablo. So these 2 activities, similarly to the ones that we saw before of the roving cluster coordinators and roving information managers, these will be seconded to UNHCR. So they require also that the applicant is a UNHCR standby partner. Those organizations who are UNHCR standby partners, they know it. Here we have 2 roles. These are new roles, new positions. First one, global focal point for research. This is a role that is very much in line with the global shelter cluster strategy to advance research, and this focal point will be a link between academia and the shelter partner agencies to make sure that the research needs that operational partners have on the ground are met by the academia. This will be implementing the priority research themes that was identified by the SAG, but also other initiatives to identify priority themes for research that have been undertaken by other parts of the cluster and other groups within the sector. So that's for the global focal point for research, activity 10. For activity 11 is another role, also new. We had a similar role, but a bit different in the past. This one is about advocacy. So it's another point, also another part of the strategy. And the idea for this role is to convey the messages that the cluster needs to pass on the importance of the sector for people affected by conflict or natural disasters to be able to get back in their feet, how shelter is such an important component, explain the impact that shelter has on other sectors as well, and explain also the underfunding that this sector is currently suffering, as well as other constraints that the sector has in terms of staffing or others. So this focal point for advocacy is also a senior position. It will be hosted the same as the global focal point for research for 18 months. We are expecting full time, and we are expecting some contribution from the standby partner who applies for this one to cover the salary and the cost. And there will be a contribution to each of the roles of $100,000 from the USAID BHA grant. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. The next activity, activity 12, is to support evidence-based shelter cluster strategy and monitoring and implementation of the response. There is a total of $110,000 available for this activity. And yes, for instance, this is to organize shelter country level, shelter cluster damage and needs assessments, to inform the development of the humanitarian response plan or of the flash appeal, depending how they call it. Sometimes they call it flash appeal, sometimes they call it HRP. It is to support the assessment, to help the design of the shelter section of these planning processes, to support the design of the country-level shelter cluster strategy, but also to monitor the progress in the implementation of the shelter cluster strategy, the shelter cluster component of the HRPs, monitor at the outcome level, and also to carry out evaluations on behalf of country-level shelter clusters, obviously in coordination and cooperation with country-level shelter cluster partners. So there is a total of $110,000 available under Activity 12. The next activity is to support the organization and participation of the Global Shelter Cluster annual events, the Shelter Coordination Workshop, and the Global Shelter Cluster meeting. As you may be aware, these are the two key annual events of the Global Shelter Cluster, where country-level clusters and global-level cluster partners come together to discuss progress in the implementation of the Global Shelter Cluster strategy, to share practice and lessons learned, and to prioritize the work of the shelter cluster. We do this once a year. It has traditionally been in October, but we have changed now so as to accommodate better timing for the country levels that are busy in October with the HRP process, and we are going to hold these events in June. Now, it is unclear at the moment whether we will be able to have a face-to-face event. Last year was online, and this year, for sure, we will have an online event in June. And it may be that we no longer have a face-to-face event this year because of COVID. So this funding might be revised eventually, depending on how the situation evolves. But the funding is to support usually participation of key partner representatives from country level that cannot afford to come. Also, it can cover costs of the meeting when we have the meeting face-to-face. The next activity, Activity 14, is to support the organization of regional and country-level shelter practice and lessons learned workshops, or fora. Some of you may be familiar with the regional shelter fora. We have held, there have been a few of these events in the past, in Africa, in MENA, in Asia, and in the Americas. And they are events where shelter practitioners come together to present initiatives, to discuss good practices, bad practices, to share basically shelter and settlements response practice amongst the practitioners that participate, and they are normally organized at the regional level. Although there is a lump sum of 40,000, again, because we would like the funding to support as many initiatives as possible, we have put a cap of $10,000 per event maximum so that we can support at least the organization of 4 events. So if any of you would like to organize or host one of these shelter fora, you are welcome to apply for this funding. Last year we had it in 2019. We had an Asia Shelter Forum in Indonesia. Last year it was going to be organized in Nepal, and it was though an online event was organized, but the face-to-face event has been postponed to this year. This is just an example of the the regional shelter fora, so that those who are familiar with it refer to that when thinking of this activity. Activity 15 is shelter projects. This is a flagship publication of the Global Shelter Cluster. It has been going on for a number of years now, and this lump sum is to support the next edition of shelter projects. Obviously, there is an existing working group within the cluster that is running and managing this publication, and there is some funding here to support the next edition, as I said, of $40,000. And the next set of activities, the last one, they cover the last three activities of the grant and the result 2 as well, and is to support the advocacy, policy and guidance work of the Global Shelter Cluster through its bodies, and to support better access to information and knowledge through the website and the app. So activity 16 is basically a fund of lump sum of 120,000 US dollars to support the work of the Global Shelter Cluster working groups, the communities of practice, the strategic advisory group, and the donor consultation group. These are bodies of the Global Shelter Cluster that has specific responsibilities and work plans, and any of those bodies could apply for funding from this grant to advance the outputs, deliverables, activities of the that they have decided within the work plan. Obviously, all of these activities fall within the Global Shelter Cluster strategy and are to advance different elements of the Global Shelter Cluster strategy. We have working groups on a number of issues such as disability inclusion, settlements in urban areas. We have working group on shelter and vulnerability classification, and a number of other working groups in priority areas of work that a few agencies would like to advance. There's also one on promoting safer building or safe recovery. You can refer to the Global Shelter Cluster website. Normally, I imagine the agencies chairing these working groups would be applying for funding, but please, if you participate in any of these working groups, have that conversation in the working group and see whether you would like to benefit from some of this funding. And the last two activities are 20,000 and 10,000 US dollars to continue to improve, develop, maintain the Global Shelter Cluster website, which is a key knowledge management and information resource for clusters at the country level and at the global level, and its sister app, the Global Shelter Cluster app, which we launched last year, but it continues to require continuous updating development. So if anyone is interested in accessing this funding to help us develop and translate and continue to improve our Global Shelter Cluster website and the app, you're welcome to apply for the last two activities, 17 and 18.
Pablo, before we move on, we have a few questions on the activities. So I think there is a question on activity 9. If you could go back to the activity 9. The question is if the 40,000 can be split in different initiatives as the above, or can it be only for one online training, I assume. Jordan, if you would like to rephrase your question, you're also welcome to speak up.
All right. No, of course, the more initiatives we can support, the better. So it can be split in different initiatives for sure. There is no need to send initiatives for the total amount of 40,000 or send one initiative for the total amount of 40,000. Not at all. We welcome initiatives of any amounts under this activity 9. The overall amount we can award to the development and updating of online trainings cannot exceed 40,000. But within that amount, we could support 3 different initiatives or however many.
Thanks.
The next question is from Davide on localization. Davide, would you like to ask it out loud? So basically...
No, thank you. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good morning, everybody. Congratulations again to Federation and UNHCR to securing these funds. And my question is related to the localization. If localization is something implemented by a national NGO or is something implemented by an international NGO locally, or both? And I have another question is about the co-funding. If you clarify, the co-funding can be also in kind. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Nice to hear from you. With regards to the first question, any agency can apply for this. Obviously, we will see later on in the selection criteria that for this particular initiative of localization, we have removed the criteria of co-funding in that we will not necessarily provide more points in the assessment of the proposals under the localization initiatives to proposals that come with co-funding, only for this, so as to encourage the participation and the application from local NGOs that may not be able to afford co-funding. So we obviously welcome proposals from local NGOs, but it is not restricted. Anyone is welcome to apply under this initiative. And I couldn't quite get the second question because it cut off a little bit at the end. Could you repeat the second one?
Yeah, it was about the co-funding. You replied to that too.
Okay, yeah.
Co-funding could have been done in kind, but if it's not one of the criteria anymore, and so fine. And nice to hear your voices too.
All right. Yeah. I will. It's only the co-funding criteria has only been removed, I think, for this one on localization initiatives, precisely to encourage participation of local NGOs, but it does remain for other initiatives. But I'll go through it in a minute.
So
Shirin, are there more questions?
Yes, we have a couple. So next question is from Susan on search capacity activities. Susan, if you prefer to ask it yourself, please go ahead. If not, Susan is asking if the employment starts later than April, so it will be only for 16 months, will the same costs still be provided?
Yes, we do realize that it may not be possible to start in April because there's still a process to follow, not only to finalize the allocation of this grant, but then to sign the project agreements and then for the recruitment process to take place. So it may not be possible to start in April. If it's less, basically the amount of funding available is the same. You will see in the selection criteria, cost-effective proposals will be rated higher. So those proposals that offer a bit more cost-effective solution will receive. There are a number of criteria. One of them is in relation to the cost, so we'll receive more points under that criteria. If there is excess funding, then we will see how we in discussion with the Global Shelter Cluster Strategic Advisory Group, how to use that funding. Otherwise, if the entire funding is used up in the 16 months, that's fine as well.
Miguel wants to add something, I guess.
Yes, Miguel.
Yes, thank you, Pablo. It's a comment on this question because indeed it could happen. One of the options that could be studied is the possibility of either the support extending beyond the life of the grant, so the total of the 18 months, some of them happening later, or keeping the same time, the same ending at the same time, but providing more people. Instead of 2 positions, maybe 2 positions plus 4 months of a third one, for instance, or some type of arrangement like that. This is something that we will be discussing and negotiating, as Pablo mentioned, in the coming days.
Yes, and of course, if one solution, for instance, is extending beyond the end of the grant period, that should be done with the co-funding that the hosting agency contributes, because all of the funding under this grant need to be used up by the end of September 2022. Obviously, there is the possibility of requesting a no-cost extension, but we would like to avoid that if at all possible and use up all the funding by then.
Okay, the next question is from Jess. So for activities 8 and 7, are you looking for stand-alone activity, or it could be a part of a wider program?
Okay, we haven't really been very prescriptive in the definition of these activities. I don't think there's a problem with it being part of a larger program. However, obviously this needs to be clearly identified in the project proposal what element this funding is going to support within that program, because we need to be able to assess it against other proposals we may receive. That's my initial thinking. Miguel, what do you think? I presume that the other part of the larger program can be considered as co-funding, but obviously needs to be activities that support shelter cluster objectives. It's not this grant is not to support individual agency initiatives. It's to support activities within that many agencies host and participate and lead that support country level shelter clusters or regional or global level initiatives, always within the shelter cluster processes, the shelter cluster systems, etc. I don't know if the answer is clear.
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you very much. I was just I was wondering about the amount of money because it was quite small, but you've kind of answered that in your previous answer as well about encouraging proposals from local actors. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jess.
You also had an additional question, Jess, about how many activities you could.
Oh yeah, if we were interested in doing some work under 2 different activities, would you consider, or is it just choosing one per agency?
No, there is no limit in the number of activities that one agency can apply for, so you're welcome to apply for more than one activity, no problem.
Great, thanks very much.
Right, next we have Luis. Luis, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot for the opportunity. I was just wondering to what extent some of the activities partners could propose could also benefit or target practitioners from other sectors than shelter and settlement. Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Is it possible to propose activities that benefit shelter and settlement clusters and practitioners, as well as practitioners from other sectors?
I imagine if it's well argued and justified and it falls within the general objectives and within the strategy of the Global Shelter Cluster, I don't think there will be a problem at all. We do encourage inter-cluster initiatives and intersectoral initiatives. We are aware that shelter has an impact in many other sectors. So if it's well argued and justified, I think that can be considered.
Okay, if it's a good answer, then we move on to Elisa.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation, first of all. Going back to the first activities, 3, 4, 5, 6, I noticed that in the description of the activity title, here you mentioned just a salary. I wanted to understand for this set of activities if travel costs cannot be covered, and what's the plan, noting that these are roles that are meant also to travel and to deploy. Thank you.
Miguel, you want to take that one?
Sorry, Pablo. Apologies, I was a bit distracted. Which question are we answering now?
3, 4, 5, and 6, the roving cluster coordinator and the information management. The table mentions only salary. The question was whether it can also cover travel costs, given that they have this role to deploy.
Yes, ideally, we would try to cover the travel cost with other funds, let's say country level UNHCR country level cluster funds, but there could be situations where this is not possible. So indeed, it would be good to include some costs on travel costs there, but there won't be very high because we will try to absorb as much as possible to cover costs from other places.
Thank you, Miguel.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question we have is from our academic partner, Charles. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. Yes. I'm really glad to see funding for a global focal point for research in this bid. So thanks to the cluster coordinators for making this happen. Academic institutes are unlikely to have agreements with UNHCR, so probably cannot make an application. So what would you think are the possibilities of contribution to this role from academic institutes? Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I will answer that one. This is a very good point, Charles, and you're very right. Probably this is something that we need to reflect and consult internally. There could be other ways that this could be addressed. So we will consult internally, find ways, and answer back in the answer to the questions that Pablo will explain later how these questions will be made public. We will answer that question. We will also get in touch with you to answer that. But I see that John has also a comment.
Yeah.
So is it okay?
Can I just, because in relation to that, it may be a possibility that some of the partner organizations can hold contracts of the academics or facilitate for the formalities to be deployed under UNHCR. So in principle, DRC or NRC or NORCAP could possibly hold a contract for academics to enable this to work in collaboration with the universities. So I just wanted to know if that's a relevant modality, as it would facilitate this.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks for that. Is that answering the question, Charles?
Yes, thank you, Miguel. Thank you very much.
That's it for now. These questions, Pablo, you can move ahead.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, but any proposal that you submit cannot include in excess of 7% admin costs or indirect costs. Obviously, we prefer if it doesn't include any because there is more funding available, but we understand this may not be possible. But unfortunately, we do have a limit of maximum 7% of admin cost for any proposal you submit. Now, these are the selection criteria for the activities that we just went through, the 18 activities. Those that are HR related have a couple of additional criteria, such as it will be possible to deploy to any country, because some organizations may have limits in their mandate or for other reasons to which countries they may deploy. But there is the list there. Basically, we do incentivize proposals that come with co-funding, except for that one on localization. We do encourage proposals for continuity reasons and because of the existing expertise that carry on from previous contributions to the cluster, that they have a similar activity in the past. In terms of HR, we do prefer full dedication to the cluster, so that gets a few more points if the proposal comes with a full-time dedication to the cluster, although it's not a requirement, but it will receive more points for that. If the organization is committed to continue the activity after the BHA funding, then also there will be additional points. You can go through the criteria there, and you can see the criteria and the different weighting for each of those criteria. You also have those criteria in the list of activities, an Excel file that I will show you later on. You would have to fill up how your proposal meets each of those criteria. There will be a selection committee reviewing those proposals. I'll get there in a minute. So the call for proposals, the call for expression of interest, the call for proposals was launched on the 10th of February, on Wednesday this week. We're hosting now the two webinars, one we had yesterday and the one we're having now. And then you may submit proposals by anytime before the close of business 22nd of February. Then there is a selection committee that is composed of representatives of the Global Shelter Cluster Strategic Advisory Group and IFRC internal representatives, which is a requirement of our internal procedures for the selection of partners that will review the proposals between the 22nd or well, the 23rd and the 26th of February. For those proposals that are selected, the partners, non-national society, that is non-Red Crescent organizations that are selected will have to go through a financial management and risk assessment. So we leave some time for that because the organizations will have to submit a number of documents. It's just basically a due diligence process that we have to go through before we enter into any agreements with any external partners. And hopefully project agreements will be signed by March 15 or at the latest by the end of March so that activities can start by April. Now, in order to apply, you have to submit two documents. One is the list of activities Excel table and the project proposal template. You will have access to these documents through links provided in the Global Shelter Cluster communication or message that we sent out on Wednesday. We also sent one on Thursday last week. If you don't have the links of these documents, please send an email to proposals@sheltercluster.org to request these documents. I will show you now these two documents. You have to submit these two documents to that email address by the 22nd of February. Actually, Shirin, could you clarify? It's not clear to me whether it is before the 22nd of February or by close of business of the 22nd of February.
It should be COB actually, yes, sorry.
All right. Okay, so by end of the day on the 22nd of February. If you have any questions, this is what Miguel was referring earlier, you can send those questions to the email address as well by the 15th of February at the latest. We will be posting this webinar as well as any questions and our answers page in the Global Shelter Cluster website for this grant. Maybe Shirin, you can put the link in the chat for this page. So we will collect all the questions, and because the answers may be useful to others who might not have thought of the question, and also in our procedure we will have to make those answers public. So we will share all the answers in the page of the Global Shelter Cluster website dedicated to this grant. Also follow-up questions like the one from Charles after internal consultations, we will post the answers there. So you're welcome to check that page regularly to see, but also to send your questions before the 15th of February. We'll do our best to respond at the maximum within 2 days. And as I explained, they are shared with everyone. As I explained earlier, for those proposals that are selected, you will have to go through this due diligence process where you will have to submit a number of documents to us to basically prove that you have sound financial management systems, sound organization structure, etc. And I think this is the end of the presentation. I just want to quickly show you the two documents that I mentioned earlier, the two documents that you have to submit.
Before you go to the documents, could you take a question from Augusto?
Yes, of course, yes.
Augusto, you're there?
Yes, hello. I was having trouble with my mic. Pablo and Shirin, what happens after February 22? Is there a kind of process between the IFRC, HCR, Global Shelter Cluster with the partner once the proposal are pre-selected for a kind of fine-tuning, or what is submitted before the 22 is the final the final proposal?
Hi, Augusto. That's a good question. There is a possibility within the procedures to go back to the partners if the selection committee has questions, or if the selection committee, for instance, has two good proposals and there might be room to negotiate with the different partners whether the proposal can be revised with a slightly reduced budget, or there might be communication back to partners or readjustments to the proposal submitted. So this obviously will happen between that period of the 22nd to the 26th when the selection committee is reviewing the project partner proposals.
All clear, thanks a lot.
Are there other questions at the moment?
Not for now, no. Not for
All
now.
right. So let me quickly show you those two documents that you have to submit if you'd like to present a proposal. One is the list of activities template. It might be too small in your screens, but you have links to this document. And as I said in the Global Shelter Cluster message that we sent, there are the instructions there, but basically this is an Excel table that includes all 18 activities that I just went through in the presentation. So the first one is the global focal point for HLP, the 2 positions. The next is the roving coordinator, etc. There is a set of 18 activities. The ones in blue are supporting result 1 of the BHA grant proposal, and the ones in green are supporting the result 2 of the BHA proposal. So you will see for each of these activities on the right-hand side, you have the criteria for selection with a weighting. And then here you will have to fill the gray area for the activity or activities that you are submitting proposals for. You may submit only one, so then you leave all the others blank or don't complete them. You just complete the one you are submitting for. If you submit more than one, then you complete those that you're submitting for. This is a very limited space. So for instance, here, maximum 30 words, maximum 30 words. So you can elaborate more on this in the project proposal template, which is the Word document that I will show you in a minute. Now you don't have to submit, you have to submit only one Excel table with the activities that you're submitting proposals for. You don't have to submit one file per activity. You can use the same file for several activities. Now, in addition to this, you have the project proposal template itself. This is a Word document. Hang on a minute. Here it is. This is a Word document. It's a basic project proposal template where you have the key information about the activity or initiative that you are seeking funding for, which of those 18. Here it's basically to provide the rationale for the activity. You can also here provide further information on how you meet the different selection criteria. Here you have a summary of the project design. Basically, you need to use the same goal and outcomes that we give you here, which are the goal and outcomes of the BHA proposal approved by USAID. Now, obviously, the outputs, you will have to define the outputs of your proposal, which will be contributing to either result 1 or, either outcome 1 or outcome 2 of the BHA proposal. In that Excel table, as I said, those blue are contributing to outcome 1. Those activities in green in the Excel table are contributing to outcome 2. Now, some of you may be thinking of submitting proposals for more than one activity. Because we need to compare different proposals, while you can submit only one Excel table, ideally you would be able to submit now one project proposal template per activity. However, we realize this may be too cumbersome. So you can also submit one project proposal template only if you are submitting to different proposals, but make sure that you include separate outputs for each of those activities you're submitting proposals for, and also a separate budget, because we need to be able to compare at the end of the day. Otherwise, if you lump it all together in one proposal without clear separation, it may be very difficult to compare with other proposals we receive under those 18 activities. But if you have doubts, please do ask. Do send us an email to proposals@sheltercluster.org and we can help you through the process. I think that's everything I wanted to show. I don't know if there are additional questions at the moment. Shirin in the chat or anyone in the call, please.
Pablo, maybe you could show how to navigate to the BHA page on the website if they don't have the link.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm trying to share the screen. Okay. So actually, if you go to sheltercluster.org, the homepage, you have directly there where the USAI logo, the link to the page of the USAID grant in the website. So you just click there. I think it may be here on the left-hand menu as well. Yes, here it is as well. Because these are featured, they change sometimes, but we will keep it here for a while, at least until the project proposal period ends. In any case, you can always find it here on the left-hand menu on the homepage of the cluster website. If you click there, it will take you to this page where you have links to all the documents that you need to submit. So here, point number 3, to apply, you have to fill in the list of activities. If you click there, it will take you to the document that you can download. It's the Excel table that I just showed you. And then here is the project proposal template, which is the Word document that I just showed you. Equally, if you link there, it'll take you to the page where you can download that document. And here you have the email address where you can send your questions for clarifications anytime before the 15th of February.
And just one comment to make, among the documents, we uploaded the entire proposal that was made from the Global Shelter Cluster to the BHA. So you will be able to see where all these 18 activities are coming from in that proposal.
Yes, thank you, Shirin, for pointing that out. There it is. That is the document that was approved by BHA to the Global Shelter Cluster via IFRC. You have the entire narrative of the proposal there if you want to refer to it. And other documents that we have made available, the process for selection, etc. So I didn't realize we've actually exceeded the time. It's 11:07 Geneva time at the moment. Are there any last minute questions?
There's one more question about whether there is a funding ceiling for an agency applying for several activities.
We haven't defined a budget ceiling. Our intent is to try and benefit as many agencies as possible, obviously, but we haven't established a ceiling as to how much funding one single agency may receive. Just, I think we will leave it here. Thank you very much for your participation. I hope you will continue to work with us regardless of the BHA funding. One thing I want to make clear is that there are many avenues to participate in the Global Shelter Cluster, and BHA funding is only one of them. There are existing processes at the country level and the global level. There is the working groups, communities of practice. There are many ways in which your contributions, your interest, your expertise are welcome and can help us all advance as a sector. And while this is also one avenue, the BHA grant with funding that we can try and work together to advance our common goals. Please do not get discouraged if you submit a proposal and it is not selected. We can continue to work together to see how we can advance those initiatives, those ideas that are of common interest to all. So thank you very much. I'll leave it here, and we're available for any questions you may have at that email address. Thank you again for your support. Thanks.
Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you, Pablo.
Thanks. Take care.